Sparta was one of the most dominant of all the Greek city-states, and is most often remembered for their athletic and militaristic values. Sparta was a city-state located in the southeastern Peloponnese region of ancient Greece. It grew to rival the size of the city-states Athens and Thebes by subjugating its neighbouring region of Messenia. Though Sparta absorbed this population, it did not integrate the conquered people into society. Spartan society was separated into social classes, and conquered people were not given political rights or citizenship. Even lower than the conquered population was a group called the Helots. Helots were responsible for agricultural duties and other day-to-day tasks that supported the Spartans. Spartan citizens required this support because they focused solely on athletic and military training and politics. Two kings from two different families ruled Sparta. This ensured that when one king ventured out on a military campaign, the other could continue to rule the city. A council of elders advised the kings in addition to serving as judges and hosting public assemblies. Military activity was essential to Sparta. At the age of 7, Spartan boys would enter a rigorous military training program. This was meant to prepare them for life in the army. Soldiers were trained as hoplites, or heavily armed foot soldiers. The Spartan army was known for its skill in on-land combat. It is known that Sparta was a city without any walls. The well-trained elite hoplites were considered as the walls protecting Sparta. In Greek myth, Lacedaemon, who was the son of Zeus and Taygete, was the founder of the city of Sparta. He had several children, with the most famous of them being Lycurgus, who became the lawgiver for the Spartans. According to legend, Lycurgus was inspired by the oracle at Delphi to implement a series of radical reforms in Spartan society. These reforms included strict regulation of marriage and childbearing, as well as military training and education for all Spartan citizens. The result was a highly disciplined and militaristic society that valued strength, courage, and loyalty above all else. However, modern historians believe that a Hellenistic people group called the Dorians moved into the Peloponnese about 1100 BC, including Laconia. Then, by the 9th century BC, they had built villages in the place that would become the city of Sparta. The people that made up Spartan society were divided into two distinct groups known as the Spartiates, who were full citizens of the city-state, and the Perioikoi, who were non-citizens who enjoyed a certain degree of autonomy. The Spartiates were males over the age of 30 who had completed their military training. They were required to devote their time to military training and service. This was done in order to maintain a strong fighting force that was necessary for the defense of Sparta and its territories. In contrast, the Perioikoi were not full citizens. However, they did play important roles in society as traders, fishermen, sailors, manufacturers, and craftsmen. As a result, the economy of Sparta relied heavily upon their work, and the Spartiates provided military protection in return for their wealth. The Helots were the slaves of ancient Sparta, who were descended from the defeated Messenians after Sparta's expansion conquests. They provided the raw manual labour that the Spartans required to run their city, primarily agriculture. As slaves, they had no rights. They were not even allowed to marry, buy or sell, or even travel without their masters or the government's permission. There were four main powers within the Spartan government. These were the two kings, the council or the Gerousia, the assembly or the ecclesia, and the ephors. Each element was expected to respect the political powers of the others, while also ensuring that each group did not abuse those powers. Sparta was governed by two hereditary kings, one from each of the two different royal families known as the Eurypontids and Aegiads. The kings were part of the council, and their vote was considered equal to other members of the council. The kings had the special privilege of being the supreme commanders of the army. Usually, One king went on campaign, while the other remained back home in Sparta. The council was made up of the 2 kings and 28 Spartan citizens over the age of 60. They acted as a legislative body that passed laws and decrees. The assembly included all males over 30 years who were citizens, and it had the power to vote on proposed laws from the council by either shouting their approval at voting time. The ephors were a group of 5 citizens that were elected annually and given the task of supervising the kings, council and assembly and ensuring that they upheld the laws of Sparta. Spartan society was based on a strict code of military discipline, which ensured that all citizens were well trained in the art of warfare. The Spartan army was widely regarded as one of the most formidable fighting forces in the ancient world. Spartan hoplites were equipped a large round bronze and leather shield called a hoplon, and a 2 to 3 meter bronze-tipped wooden spear called a dory. The spear was used as a stabbing weapon, usually used over the shoulder. This way, the hoplite could hide behind the hoplon while stabbing their enemy safely. If a hoplite ever lost his spear, he could rely upon a short sword to defend themselves. Spartan warriors were famous for wearing a red cloak. The Spartans typically employed a phalanx formation in battle, which was a large rectangular body of troops that marched together in close ranks. A phalanx usually had 8 to 12 rows of soldiers that would create enough momentum to push the enemy backwards. This formation was extremely effective in defense, but could also be used to devastating effect in offensive maneuvers. The gauche system was a series of educational and military training programs that all male Spartan citizens were required to complete. The purpose of the agoge was to instill loyalty, discipline, and courage in the Spartan people. After a new baby was born, it is said that they were inspected by the ephors for any physical defects. If any were found, the child was left alone on the nearby Mount Taygetus to die either by exposure to the elements or wild animals. The purpose of such a brutal practice was to ensure that only physically fit adults would populate Sparta and its armies. Boys began their training at the age of 7, when they were taken from their families and placed in state-sponsored barracks. They would remain there for the next decade, during which time they would be subject to a strict regime of physical conditioning, military training, and education. At the age of 18, Spartan boys became full-fledged members of the army. They would serve in the military until the age of 30, at which point they would be eligible for citizenship. Sparta's determined focus on military excellence helped it to gain a reputation among other Greek city-states as a fearsome warrior society. This reputation was further bolstered by the fact that Sparta was largely able to avoid being conquered or sacked by its enemies. The legendary status of its warrior citizens even helped explain why the city of Sparta did not have any city walls for most of its history. It was thought that the Spartans were so fearsome that no enemy would dare to attack them. However, the Spartan way of life was not as perfect as it appeared to be from the outside. In reality, Sparta was a highly stratified society that required strict obedience to its code of conduct. Spartans who did not adhere to these rules were subject to punishment, and in some cases, they were even banished from the city. This reputation eventually led to the creation of the Spartan mirage of power. This idea of Sparta as a perfect warrior society was largely a myth, but it was perpetuated by writers and historians who were fascinated by the city, even though the fall of Sparta was due to its lack of ability to hold on to power. Faced by the threat of an amassing Persian army in the east and tribes of barbarians in the north, around 550 BC, an alliance known as the Peloponnesian League was formed between Sparta and a number of other city-states in the Peloponnese. The purpose of this alliance was to defend the Peloponnese from outside invaders. Member cities of the League were not required to pay tribute to Sparta except in times of war. Instead, members of the League could vote on decisions. However, Sparta was the de facto leader of this confederacy. It alone could call meetings, and any decisions made by the League were not binding on Sparta if it did not desire it. As a result, the Peloponnesian League was an important part of Spartan foreign policy, and it helped to make Sparta one of the most powerful states in Greece. The Peloponnesian League continued to grow in power, and by the mid-5th century BC, it was one of the most powerful alliances in Greece. However, its growth in power and influence led it into conflict with another growing Greek cities, Athens and Thebes. The Peloponnesian War was a conflict between Athens and Sparta that lasted for 27 years. The war began in 431 BC and was fought on land and sea. Due to the number of cities either committed to the Peloponnesian League or Athens-Delian League, the war involved most of the city-states in Greece. During the Peloponnesian War, both sides made use of mercenaries, or professional soldiers who fought for pay. The Peloponnesian War was a complex conflict, and it had a profound impact on the course of Greek history. As the preeminent military power in Greece, it was expected that Sparta would secure a rapid victory. However, this was not the case. Both sides had victories and defeats with high death tolls. The war lasted for more than 2 decades and eventually ended with the defeat of Athens by the forces of Lysander of Sparta in 404 BC. Despite the victory, the heavy death toll left Spartan military forces weakened and in desperate need of recovery. The true victor of the Peloponnesian War was the city-state of Thebes. The Peloponnesian War left Sparta as the dominant power in Greece. However, the war had also taken a toll on Sparta, and in the following years, Sparta's population decreased, and its economy was no longer able to support its large army. In addition, many of Sparta's allies became resentful of its dominance, and they began to rebel against Spartan rule. By the mid-4th century BC, Sparta's power had declined significantly, and it was no longer the dominant force in Greece. At the same time, Thebes was now motivated to reassemble the Boeotian Confederacy. Theban leaders like Peloponnese and Epaminondas reassembled Theban forces and began to fight back against the Spartan forces that commanded towns of Boeotia. As each town was freed, it was made a part of the new Boeotian League again. This culminated in a much larger victory, where Peloponnese with a small skirmishing force defeated a much larger Spartan force in the Battle of Tegea in 375 BC. This event showed the people of both Athens and Thebes that restoration was possible and that the Spartans could be defeated. Thebes got so powerful that Athens began to fear them and ended up becoming allies with Sparta. It may have been too late. In 371 BC, Thebes met Sparta and Athens in open battle on the plain of Leuctra. The Theban leader Epaminondas revolutionized battlefield tactics known to ancient Greece. The innovative and unconventional army formations with use of cavalry and light infantry to harass the enemy's elite forces resulted in a decisive victory for Thebes. The Battle of Leuctra marked the end of Spartan military dominance in ancient Greece. After losing its dominance and influence over the region, Sparta continued to decline in power over the next few centuries, culminating in its incorporation into the Roman Empire in 146 BC. Although the Spartans are often held up as an example of military prowess and strength, they were not invincible. In fact, the Spartan state was eventually brought down over time by a number of factors, including internal strife, economic decline, and foreign invasion. Despite its eventual fall from power, Sparta remains one of the most iconic and influential societies of antiquity. Its legacy can be seen in many modern militaries, which continue to promote the values of discipline, courage, and patriotism that were first espoused by the ancient Spartans. Stay tuned to find out more about the greatest military forces in history. Reliving the military conquests of ages past, this is Time Capsule. Please like, subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out. Thank you for watching. See you again next time on Time Capsule.